We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and to tell you the truth, I never was much for the holidays. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's winter holiday month, and this week we are talking the 2000 film Reindeer Games. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host and former cellmate, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
You said you weren't going to tell anyone about that. Yes, I am quite ready to talk about the last of our holiday films for this year.
You don't mind people knowing that you're in prison. You just are upset they knew that we were cellmates, right? That's the part that
Yes,
I was supposed to keep
that's
under
the
wraps.
part that you the trust has been broken.
Reindeer Games. Andrew, what is your history with this movie? Had you seen it before? Did you see it in theaters? It's not exactly a holiday classic, so I can't imagine if you have seen it before, it wasn't too often. But what's this movie's place in your life, Andrew?
Very little. But yeah, there's not a lot of history here. I remember it coming out. Like, I remember, like, seeing, like, ads on TV for Reindeer Games. And going through that whole thing. This is back, when Ben Affleck as a leading man was a thing that they were really dedicated to for a while. Something we come back to a few times throughout the 2000s. But, yeah, I can't say there's a deep history here. Obviously, I was 13 when this came out. Not really the age my parents were like, let's go take our son to watch Ben Affleck action movies. Nothing really there. Didn't enter like the house, like tape library or anything like that. There's really nothing. I'm sure I watched it at some point just because once pop culture started making jokes about it, I'm sure my brain was like, better get in on the action. And I'm guessing it promptly really left my brain because I don't think about this movie very much. But
movie hits after Armageddon, which is like Ben Affleck as a legit leading man, the next guy, but before Pearl Harbor, where it's like it's a joke that he's a leading man. It was a very short time period. This movie hits in between, so it's like half and half. It's one of the first times I remember like oh, he's a movie star, but that doesn't mean his movie is gonna be a hit. Like, we can still make fun of it, or it can be a dud or whatever, So I know I might have seen this movie before. I know, like, my family rented it at least once when it came out. I remember my dad watching it. Can't remember if I sat and watched the whole thing or just all parts of it, but I had seen parts of it. But this was definitely my first time watching it, beginning to end. And yeah, mostly I'm just familiar, like, with the legacy of this movie, that it's just like a joke title. And we've talked before about its place in role models as just shorthand for Ben Affleck, aka shorthand for a white person. You white?
Yep.
You Ben Affleck.
You Ben Affleck.
But I have now seen the movie, and we are going to talk about it, specifically the positives. What it does well. It's what we do here on Best of the Rest. # Positivity Podcast. Before we jump into those specifics, let's set the stage a little bit here. The movie is released. Have you looked at the release date already, Andrew?
I have not.
Guess. When was this movie released?
Thanksgiving 2000.
February 25th.
All right.
2000.
All right.
Not a good sign to release such a clear holiday adult movie in February, which is, the dumping ground.
Was that like?
Said.
Okay. All right. It was supposed to be Christmas '99. But the test audience scores made them do additional editing and shoot some new scenes. And so they pushed it back to February. So, thanks, audiences. You ruined what would have otherwise been a Christmas classic.
The movie's made on a budget of $42 million, but at the box office, it only brings in $32 million. It is a box office bomb. Critically, it's not well received. It holds just a 25% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's just shy of 100 reviews there. Audience score, really not any better, 27%. So just no matter how you slice it, this movie, total flop.
Yeah, I think that's about the only way you can put it. I will say I did see a friend on social media just the other day talking about like he found a copy of this on tape and was like super jazzed to go home and watch it. So I'm not going to say there's no fans of this movie, and I'm not going to say there's no people that don't get enjoyment out of watching it around the holidays, but they're the outliers, generally speaking. There's been no critical reevaluation, rather. I mean, yeah, we'll talk more about John Frankenheimer in a minute, but there is a director's cut. I have no idea how much different. I know it adds about 20 minutes of footage that could be good, could be bad. I mean, I will say that's really significant for a director's cut. Like normally they release these either director's cut or producer's cut or unrated cut, you know, all these different versions. It's usually like under 5 minutes. It's like a 2-minute difference usually. It's a few more curse words, an extended scene or two. But 20 minutes, there's got to be like plot points in there. Like that is pretty heavy. And from a plot standpoint, this movie, it's cohesive. Like I follow it. It doesn't really feel like there's anything missing. So I am really curious what exactly it does. In fact, I own the director's cut because I had watched this video, this YouTube channel, Good Bad Flicks. They did one on Reindeer Games and the director's cut and how the movie was gutted because of test audiences and what it could have been, et cetera, et cetera. I really don't remember the specifics of it, but it was enough for me to buy the director's cut because I'm like, I gotta see if there's actually a good movie in here. Was the implication of their video that the director's cut was better, or was it not really about
100%?
That?
Yeah, that is better. Like I think it's been a minute since I watched it, so I don't want to put words in the guy's mouth, but it's still not a masterpiece, but it's a marketably better movie. And I haven't watched it, but when it was time to watch the movie for the podcast, I was like, well, maybe I'll just watch the director's cut. It can't be that different. And I looked at the run times. I saw it's a 20-minute difference. So I don't think it would be, my favorite scene might not even be in the movie when it comes time for us to discuss it. So I'm like, all right, let me watch the theatrical, base it on that. But I definitely want to go back and see that director's cut and see what differences there could be.
I literally just bought it, so I too am curious enough to go back and investigate at this point and see.
And you're about to be on an airplane, which is the perfect time to watch Reindeer Games, the director's cut.
Absolutely. That's definitely something that if you're on a plane surrounded by lots of people, this is the movie to watch.
Oh yeah, there's that very graphic sex scene 5 minutes into the movie, but other than that,
and then Charlize Theron shows herself off a couple more times throughout this movie. So, fantastic stuff.
Did I tell you that I watched My Own Private Idaho on a plane? It was one of the movies like in their. I flew United, and it was one of the movies like in their library. I watched Elvis, but I #PP. I turned it off after an hour. Then I was scrolling through there. I'm like, I've always wanted to watch this. You were almost a
third of the way through.
I know. I was like, I've watched enough to know that I don't want to finish this. But I put on that movie because I always heard it's really good, and it's River Phoenix's best performance and everything. And there's some graphic stuff in there, and
there is.
And I'm watching it on a plane. I'm like, what do? Do I put my hands up and cover it? Because I think that just draws attention to it. But also, is it more awkward to just not acknowledge it? But I'm not responsible for this. The movie, it's on the back seat of the airplane. Like the movie, the airline gave me this movie to watch.
You did this.
Yeah. It was very awkward. So yeah, watch Reindeer Games, Andrew. Maybe the director's cut. Maybe all 20 minutes is just more sex scenes.
Yep, that's why it's better.
All right, the movie is written by Aaron Kruger, alum of the show. We talked about this man previously because he also wrote Scream 3, which actually released the exact same year. Some other credits, honestly, a very interesting filmography. I know we talked about him already on Scream 3, but he wrote The Ring, The Skeleton Key, The Ghost in the Shell American live-action version, and Top Gun Maverick. I mean, real, let's just say highs and lows up and down the filmography, jumping across genres and budgets all over the place. Interesting. That's the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, and he also will be a writer on Joseph Kosinski's upcoming film, which is as of yet untitled. And he's got uncredited rewrites on Dracula 2000, Texas Rangers, Scream 4. I mean, he's had a really interesting career. I remember it being, I probably talked about this on Scream 3, but I remember it being a mild point of controversy when he was brought in for Scream 3 over versus the studio trying to make something work with Kevin Williamson. And then I remember him being brought in for Transformers 2, because he does 2, 3, and 4, I think. And people kind of being like, yep, the juvenile humor and stuff like that. They pretty much credit that almost exclusively to him. But at the same time, I mean, at this point, he's got one of the most varied careers I've ever seen, but at the same time, he's got a tremendous amount of success at this point, too. So I could think of a lot worse career paths to have than that of Aaron Kruger.
And the movie is directed by John Frankenheimer. No exaggeration, a legend in the industry. But again, I'm going to use the word interesting. An interesting filmography and body of work. Really comes to prominence in the 60s with a string of critically acclaimed taut thrillers. Probably the most well-known being The Manchurian Candidate. And that string of movies kind of sets him up for life. He's able to work the rest of his life because of what he was able to do then. Even though most of his movies aren't making too big of a splash, they're also not consistently losing money for studios, and that just is his career. Again, nothing that I see too significant late in his filmography, but a few infamous entries. He was hired to do The Island of Dr. Moreau, but he does not see that movie to completion. He directs Ronin, the late 90s Robert De Niro movie, and of course the movie we're talking about today, Reindeer Games, which does end up being his last feature-length film. It reminds me a little bit of like Brian De Palma, who has his early work that really propel him to do whatever he wants, and the scripts that he gets end up being kind of all over the place. I mean, we went through that when we talked about Mission to Mars, which also shares Gary Sinise in both of these two movies there. But yeah, interesting career path. I kind of relate those two in my mind.
Yeah, it's similar. It's kind of this string of early hits, followed by a lifetime of kind of
movies you can find in $5 bins at Walgreens now.
Well, you know, that makes it sound so mean.
I mean, there's some good stuff in there, but it is. Movies that have a DVD release but never got a Blu-ray release.
Yeah. Well, like there's such weird stuff in Frankenheimer's filmography, like The French Connection 2. Like, who directs the sequel to The French Connection? The guy who directed The Manchurian Candidate, apparently. And you got stuff mixed in there like Black Sunday and Island of Dr. Moreau. He actually does see that through because he replaces Richard Stanley on that.
Oh,
I had
it backwards. You're right.
He's brought in to stabilize that movie because it's going so terribly wrong. And and let's be honest, folks, #PP, the reason the Island of Dr. Moreau flew off a rail so hard is Marlon Brando. Everything else on that movie would have been fine. A little drama, a little diva-ish.
I don't know if Val Kilmer helped too much.
He didn't help. But if it's just Val Kilmer, it's workable. You could get around Val Kilmer just kind of being a diva. Marlon Brando, like just being like, I'm going to stay in my trailer while everybody else is out in the jungle for hours on end. That's what's ruining your movie. And so, yeah. And
I'm really intrigued by the film. I'm just looking at filmography, 1974. The title is 99 and 44/100% Dead. Know nothing about the movie, but based on that title, it sounds hilarious, and I want to see it.
It does. And then makes French Connection 2 the next year. And then just stuff like The Iceman Cometh. And then now what's interesting is that in 1998, he makes a movie called Ronin. Now, Ronin is a movie that was seen in a lot of ways to kind of be a return to form for Frankenheimer of sorts. It is a action thriller, but it's starring Robert De Niro with a massive cast. I mean, Jean Reno, Stellan Skarsgård, Sean Bean, Jonathan Pryce. And it's another one that kind of deals with shifting loyalties. It's a heist film in a way. More of an action thriller with kind of like a heist in the background. Written by J.D. Zelk and David Mamet. And David Mamet is a kind of renowned playwright, known for a variety of different things, including probably primarily Glengarry Glen Ross. And it's interesting because I didn't think that much of this when it came out, but in the aftermath, I saw that this one actually does have kind of a cult following. Obviously, the term Ronin simply means like a samurai with no master. And this was kind of a term that was applied to De Niro's character in this film. And I need to go back and rewatch it. I've heard people speak pretty highly of it. So I think Arrow actually just did a pretty nice prestige release of that. And then he follows up Ronin with Reindeer Games. Which ends up being his last full-length theatrical film before Frankenheimer very unfortunately passes away at 72 in July of 2002. So this ultimately is his last film that he makes. Still had stuff lined up at the time, though, which I thought was interesting. Like, still had movies that he was going to be looking for. I think he even had one television film that came out after this still. And I think he was signed on to direct one of the Exorcist prequels. Ended up having a stroke as a complication from some spinal surgery. So, unfortunate, but John Frankenheimer leaves behind a body of work that I think largely speaks for itself.
Well, today we're speaking specifically about his last film, Reindeer Games. Andrew, you ready?
Yes.
Nick and Rudy are prison cellmates on the verge of being released when Nick is fatally stabbed during a food fight. Once released, Rudy lies to Ashley, the woman Nick has been writing letters with, and claims he is actually Nick. Shortly after the two begin a romance, Ashley's brother Gabriel kidnaps the new Nick because he read the original Nick's letters and knows that he used to work at a casino. Gabriel plans to rob the casino using Nick's inside knowledge, and new Nick is unable to convince him that he isn't really Nick. New Nick reluctantly goes along with the plan, but soon discovers that Ashley is actually Gabriel's girlfriend, not his sister, and was playing new Nick for a fool the whole time. And the twists, Andrew, just keep coming. Pretty clear, straightforward, right? We know what's going on here. Assumed identity, that's kind of through most of this movie, kind of the thrust of the plot, and it's a good hook.
Yeah. It's starts off easy enough and then takes quite the turn as the film unfolds.
And then another turn.
And then another turn.
Then another turn.
And then
We'll get
a
to
turn,
it.
and then a turn into a valley.
we will get to it once we get to the scenes. But first, we got to talk about the cast of this film. And we're going to start with the high point, the best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Reindeer Games?
It's quite the cast, but I like my villains, Chris, so I got to go with the man, Gary Sinise, as Gabriel Monster Mercer. Gary Sinise plays our super slimy, super scummy, essentially our main villain of the piece. He's the leader of this group that kind of unwittingly lures and basically traps Ben Affleck into helping them with this heist they are planning to pull off at the Tomahawk Casino. I'm guessing somewhere near where they are, which is outside Iron Mountain, Michigan. And it is the dead of winter and it's very cold. But he's Gary Sinise. Obviously, we've talked about him before. Talked about him on our Mission to Mars episode.
I believe he got picked up a Mark Strong there as well. This might be your second time giving him a Mark Strong award.
So at least 2 times, possibly more. Lesser shows may record such things in a master document so that we could reference back to it. Not here, folks. We trust our brains.
Big mistake.
Obviously, Gary Sinise, a legend of the screen at this point with all the different things that he's done. Obviously, Lieutenant Dan, things like that. I don't need to speak too deeply about Gary Sinise, but here he is playing a super slimy, super scummy dude, and you hate him. You really don't mind when bad things happen to this man. And so it is a good performance that kind of gives you a really good, clearly defined antagonist for our lead character, Rudy, to kind of go up against. And what can you say? It's Gary Sinise. It's Gary. It's Gary. He's Gary.
Gary Sinise is great. I love Gary Sinise. And he did such a good job of like not getting locked into a box. And not even like in a constricting way, but even, I'll use Tom Hanks as a neat comparison because of Forrest Gump, but like Tom Hanks is always going to be the likable good guy. I know there's a couple villain roles in there, but more or less he's crafted this persona and there's different variations of it.
He's America's dad.
Tom Cruise in his action movies, Brad Pitt in general, you kind of know the energy you're getting. But Gary Sinise, who in Mission to Mars was just totally earnest and genuine and warm and hopeful. This is like a complete 180, and he fits in just as well as this lowlife. And, Lieutenant Dan is definitely a character with some depth and range and plays down on his luck insanely well. I don't know. I don't think the guy gets enough credit for what he's able to do here. This definitely felt like a different turn for him. I'm not sure I've seen him quite this scummy before. I gotta pitch you a movie based off his appearance here in Reindeer Games, Andrew. Imagine Gary Sinise in a film with Steve Buscemi, and they play brothers. Can you see it?
It just makes me kind of wish that it was Gary Sinise instead of basically just put Gary Sinise in Fargo with Steve Buscemi as his associate instead of I can't remember that actor's name. We've talked about him on the show before. He was in Constantine, but that's disrespectful, I'm sure.
You're replacing him in a movie, so you're already disrespecting the man. There's no need to remember his name.
I know. But I would watch it. I would kind of be shocked if that hasn't happened already. But Steve Buscemi is so weird. Like, he's such a weird chameleon man that that's a whole different conversation for another day. But sure,
I'd watch it. Have we not talked Buscemi on this podcast? Has he not made it? Somehow not made it. And
I feel like it's impossible that he hasn't done that, but there's no way he hasn't. And we haven't done the Adam Sandler month, have we?
No.
We just got to Adam Sandler with
Crazy Nights.
And is he in that at all?
I don't think so. We didn't talk about him if he is. maybe a cameo, but God, what
I don't.
if we get around to some Burton, I think Big Fish would be a good time to talk about him. Okay. Future episode. We will definitely talk some Buscemi, but he's not in this movie. But you know who is, Andrew? My Mark Strong Award winner for this film, Charlize Theron as Ashley Mercer. That's what she goes by in most of this movie, but there's a late stage twist that we'll talk about during scenes. I think she's great. And in general, I mean, everyone loves Charlize Theron. This is definitely a period in her career where she's just a working actor, taking on supporting roles, leading roles, kind of looking for a big breakthrough. And I feel like maybe it's probably Monster that launches her into like that more prestige category. And then she reinvents herself again, like as an action star. She, again, another actor that can just do it all. She is awesome. This performance is very interesting to me because I'll go down. I wrote down one of her lines early in this movie, Andrew, and I wrote it down. Look, hashtag positivity podcast. I wrote it down because it's bad. It's really bad. And I had to make sure I got the words right. She's, Nick gets out of prison and they start their romance. And Nick is like, you're so attractive. You should have no problem finding a guy. What are you doing writing prisoners? And her explanation is, all the guys I've ever been with never wanted to get to know me, who I am inside. They just want to get inside. And I was like, ugh, this is like so men writing women. There's a lot of issues with it. The delivery wasn't great. Now, of course, this is my Mark Strong Award winner. We're a positivity podcast. What am I doing? I think the twist of this movie kind of saves this performance early on because this character is giving a performance. She is giving rehearsed lines to play this man for a fool. So, yeah, it does sound really corny and like bad writing, and it's hokey in like a Lifetime movie kind of way, but it ends up ultimately playing into the movie. And our director is no fool. Charlize Theron is a class act. Like, I don't think any of that is by mistake. Obviously, your first time through, you might get to that scene like I did and be like, that's really not great. But again, I think it just ultimately feeds into where this character goes. The whole thing is a ruse. She is not who she says she is. She's playing a character, and I think she plays that character well. The reason she's getting my Mark Strong Award is because we see like 3 different versions of this character throughout the movie, and they all feel distinct. I think she nails it. Charlize Theron, Mark Strong Award winner.
I think this is a great pick. Like you said, she gets a lot of... The performance takes a lot of turns throughout the film, and she leans into all of them with ease. There's no issue with any of it. She's the kind of innocent, wide-eyed deer in the headlights to the kind of conniving villain. There's no issue sliding into whichever space that needs to be. Obviously, Charlize Theron she's fantastic. Obviously, I don't need to point out Mad Max Fury Road, where I think she sent a lot of people into a deep, deep crisis about what they might enjoy in themselves. But it is a good kind of under the radar performance throughout this film, because for most of the movie, you're led to believe one thing. And then as the twists kind of pile on, it can be a little heady for the viewer, but she doesn't waver at any moment and leans into every single piece of it. No question, no issue. So I think this is a fantastic pick, Chris.
And of course, we have the lead of this movie, a man that we have talked about multiple times before. Ben Affleck plays Rudy Duncan. Although, of course, he's called Nick most of this movie because it's the identity he assumes. But Andrew, his character's actual name is Rudy Duncan. Rudy Duncan. What is Rudy short for usually, Andrew?
I don't know that it's short for anything. I know a way we can check, though. Rudolph.
Ah! Do you get it?
I
You
hate
get
you.
it, Andrew?
I hate you.
His name is Rudolph. It's Reindeer Games. Reindeer Games, baby. Man, that works. That played out better than I could have imagined. Andrew has his head down on the desk. So, Ben Affleck, we've talked about him before. We like the guy. Interesting career path. I talked a little bit already about this is the period between Armageddon and Pearl Harbor, the ups and downs. We have Daredevil shortly after this.
Ha!
The man has had 3 or 4 career resurgences. And while I do think he is a good actor, I think it takes a while for him to find the right roles that are right for him. And I do think the Ben Affleck we have now is just so like haggard and beat down. And I think it makes him a much better actor and fits into these roles really well, which sounds kind of mean and backhanded. I'm sure he's happy and has a great life, but he just has this air about him where like it's like that meme picture of him, like with a cigarette where he's just going like, that energy that he has now, I think it really feeds into his roles, and I'm really enjoying what he's doing. But yeah, this is our early leading man, Ben Affleck. He does fine. There's a lot of, I'll say it, hokey lines, a lot of Christmas references and reindeer references here, and he gets to deliver those. Him and Gary Sinise, I think it's like 50-50. Who gets to reference more Christmas stuff, but it's good. It's Ben Affleck.
It's Ben. It's Affs. What are you going to say?
Fleck.
No, it's Fleck. It's the Fleck. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, we've talked about him endlessly before. I mean, Ben Affleck is that guy that like growing up having watched Kevin Smith movies, I realized that I've basically been watching Ben Affleck stuff my entire life. And it really is a weird thing to think about. Because like I remember when Armageddon came out and it was like a big deal. And like so I've watched this man's entire career from the rise to the fall to the rise to the fall to the rise to the fall to the sort of other rise he's now in. But I will say I do think the guy gets like a lot of undue hate. I think he always has. Yeah. I think he's always kind of gotten I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's something like Creed, and I'm not going to say that like he hasn't done like bad movies, but like who hasn't done bad movies? Like he seems to get
Andrew,
hit.
I have never starred in a bad film. I will let you know.
Well, for that matter, neither have I. But
all right,
that's
why we are qualified to judge all these actors, Andrew.
Of course. But I will say I think he gets a lot of undue hate. I think he got a lot. I think he became an easy punching bag there for a while, and it I don't know, guys. It's just so mean, guys. Just we're better. We're better than this. And you know, when a movie's bad, there's no one reason that it's bad, unless you're Marlon Brando on the island of Dr. Moreau. That's the only instance I can think of. Otherwise, I think he's doing usually what's asked of him. And I think this movie is no exception to that. I think he's doing the best he can with what he's got and making the most of it.
Dennis Farina plays Jack Banks. He is the owner of the casino they're trying to rob. And I love this guy anytime he shows up. But I'll be honest, he has passed away. He passed away in 2013. Pulmonary embolism. What a way to go. Very sad. RIP. But had a prolific career, lots of credits. But there's this short period in the very early 2000s where I saw him pop up and I loved this guy every time he showed up. So I know very little of his actual career, but I love him for it. I love his character here. It's very similar to what he's doing in Snatch, which releases the same year. He plays Avi, I think is his character's name. Wonderful. Highlight of that movie, maybe the Mark Strong Award, which is it's a stacked cast with tons of great actors pitting in some all-time performances, but he manages to stand out there. Also shows up in Stealing Harvard, which is a Tom Green comedy that I definitely saw multiple times back in the day. He's funny in that. And yeah, this little period made me a fan of this guy for life. But I mean, you're casting a casino owner. I think it's absolutely perfect. I buy it from the second he walks on screen.
Yeah, it works perfectly. I love that his whole big thing is that he doesn't want to go back to Las Vegas for some reason. They never really dive into why exactly that is, but he has zero desire to go back to Las Vegas. The implication maybe being that he's gotten into some bad business with the wrong people and he can't really go back. But yeah, another interesting career, like an actual Chicago police detective that eventually transitioned into acting roles. And eventually kind of turned that into an acting career. Even started off at a local theater company called the Steppenwolf Theater Company that still exists today. His stage debut was in a production of A Prayer for My Daughter, directed by John Malkovich, of all people, in 1982. So, I mean, that was kind of before either of them were really anybody of note. It's a interesting career path he's taken. It was consistent, like you said, had a lot of appearances in the early 2000s. He's one of those people that I think is firmly in that, like, you've seen him, you may not know his name, but you know who he is. He's very much that kind of character actor. Even did a turn of hosting one of the revivals of Unsolved Mysteries, which perfect. I can't imagine there's a much better person to do that with. But yeah, quite the career. But here he plays our would-be, he's not really a mobster, but like he owns this casino and he's kind of sort of lamenting that it's not making enough money, or at least the people that like kind of own it are. And he kind of tells them, he's like, it's the middle of Michigan in the winter, man. I can't do anything about that. He's like, I can't really do much there. So, and then even gets a chance towards the end of this film to get in on the action a little bit, using his safe that I'm not going to repeat the name of because I'm not sure if that term's still sensitive. Seems insensitive now, but
he does have this.
Otherwise,
he's like presumed dead, laying on a table, and then he gets out 2 submachine guns and blows out a window and kills some guys. Leaps through the window onto the slot machines down below and makes a
adrenaline, man.
This insane action scene out of nowhere. Yeah, it's great.
Adrenaline, it's a heck of a thing. But I think he's cast perfectly for this part, and he plays it to a T.
Let's take a look at Gary Sinise's gang, if you will. We have Clarence Williams III as Merlin. They all have like code names. And he's definitely the heavy of the group. The guy you don't want to F with. The bouncer looking guy. The actor did recently pass away in the year 2021 of cancer at the age of 81, which means he's like 60 here. I never would have guessed. The dude looks, again, I wouldn't want to mess with him. And he plays that to a T, Andrew.
He does. I mean, he got his first starring role, or kind of first big role, was on the Mod Squad, which ran from 68 to 73. So I mean, that was the late 60s. I mean, that was a good 25 years, or even almost 35 years before this movie was made. I mean, that's a long career. Just tons of brief appearances, guest appearances. Did a big run in the mid 2000s in a series of Hallmark television films called Mystery Woman. I'm guessing they were murder mystery little films that Hallmark put out there. Had bit appearances in Justified, Cold Case, Burn Notice. Even showed up on The Greatest Show of All Time for 3 episodes, Twin Peaks. He was everywhere. And here he is, like you said, he's playing the heavy, Merlin. He's the guy that kind of falls on to Nick's deception more than once, and kind of blow right past it. But I'm just saying, guys, if you listen to Merlin, you might all come out of this alive, or maybe not, based off of one of these twists.
Do you remember when they revived the Mod Squad? They made a movie in 1999. Claire Danes, Giovanni Ribisi, Omar Epps. You know who plays the captain in that revival? Dennis Farina.
There it is.
Look at that.
It all comes back around.
This gang is really like, it's character actors. top of the line character actors. We have Donal Logue as Pug. Another man we have, of course, talked about before. We talked about it on Ghost Rider. He wasn't in, I guess we talked about Blade 3. He's not in that one, but he is in the first Blade, which we watched in the Discord. Who doesn't love Donal? You need a henchman that's going to stand out, have some memorable lines, memorable look. You get Donal Logue. You need a sidekick, a best friend. You get Donal Logue. You need a lead of a sitcom that may not be number one in the ratings, but it's going to sneakily get like 8 seasons. You get Donal Logue. The man can do it all. Just insanely likable, whether he's good guys or bad guys. I always like seeing him. He's got. I am not an actor, and I have never really had aspirations to be an actor. But if I did, I would want a career like his. I think it's just the perfect level of like, you've got steady work, you're making good money, you're getting your residuals, but you're not getting mobbed every time you go to the mall. You know, it's a good place to be.
I agree. Yeah, he apparently replaced Vin Diesel of all people, which I don't quite know how
he had
that
to go.
unfolds,
He had to go record the Iron Giant, I guess.
He apparently had disagreements with John Frankenheimer. I like this. Vin Diesel was originally cast as Pug, but had disagreements with John Frankenheimer in relation to the script and his character. Vin, what character?
So this is a story that has come up. I'm citing my sources here. It comes up on Blank Check regularly because Griffin Newman is a huge Vin Diesel fan. And I believe the story is he was supposed to have a scene where he takes his shirt off. And Vin Diesel, in 1999, when they're shooting this movie, says, I only take my shirt off in Vin Diesel movies. Which don't exist yet. He's not a starring man yet, but already had that mindset. And that's what leads to him getting replaced in this movie.
I guess it worked out for him. So
yeah, I was going to say, it's a ridiculous story, but the man is a leading man of the most successful action franchise of all time at this point. I mean, you can't argue with him.
I mean, I can argue with him, sure. But anyway, Donal is great in this role. There's not a lot here, unfortunately. He is very much like third, fourth fiddle in this gang, but makes the most of the moments that he has. But yeah, he's a great pick if you need somebody to fill a spot on your heist team and bring just that right amount of personality to it.
And then Danny Trejo plays Jumpy.
The man.
I don't remember these nicknames in the movie. I'm just reading them off the cast list here. But yeah, again, like one of the greatest character actors of all time. I mean, oftentimes people just call him Machete now because that's like the one movie he's actually starred in, because he's always a supporting character, often doesn't really have names. But the dude has just done it all. He's got like literally hundreds of credits. Alum of the show, of course. Talked about him back on Halloween. He's probably showed up at some other stuff we talked about as well. But Danny Trejo, you know exactly what he's going to bring to your movie. He brings it here. They do a little bit of like, what would you call it? Like subverting expectations, where he's like really intelligent and going to night school and is interested in like in the economy whenever he's, you know, looks like Danny Trejo, looks like an actual gangster. Good stuff. Who doesn't love Danny Trejo?
He's great. He's great in this movie. He's great anytime you see him. Like I said, it's a small part. There's not a lot happening here, but makes the most of it. Makes the most of the moments that he has. Like you said, they add some ripples to his character that he's kind of smart. He's reading like Newsweek and stuff throughout the movie. But it's fun.
And of course, we got to talk about James Frain as Nick Cassidy. Not a ton of screen time. We see him early on in this movie. He's Nick. He's the guy. He's the real Nick. And he's cellmates with Rudy before getting stabbed. And up until this point, he's kind of just the old chum, the buddy, the comic relief, excited to get out, excited to meet this girl, get stabbed. And then he shows up again in the final minutes of this film, Andrew, because he's actually alive. He faked his death, hired a guy to stab him, paid off a guard to spread rumors that he actually died. He orchestrated this whole thing. I'm not even going to recite the plan right now. I don't know if I can keep it all in my head, what they go through to pull this thing off. But he's the brains of the operation. It's a big twist late in the movie. And much like Charlize Theron kind of plays two sides. He's Rudy's best friend in the beginning, and he's this ultimate villain in the end. Two distinct performances that he does pull off well. But like I said, very little screen time going on here, but played well by James.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, really just two sequences there, and he gets to play completely different characters in both of them, basically. Getting a chance to kind of spread his wings there. I've seen him around a variety of different places, but the biggest thing that I probably knew him from outside of this was Tron Legacy. He plays Jarvis, who is kind of Clue's right-hand man throughout that film. And, but, you know, a endless career all over television, all over film. He's been everywhere. And, but yeah, ultimately plays kind of our mastermind here. I don't really know how much influence he's got here, but ultimately it feels like this is kind of his whole thing. And, yeah, played me for a fool, that's for sure.
And then we have some real small parts, almost cameos here. Like Isaac Hayes plays one of the prisoners that kind of starts the food fight when he finds a cockroach in the Jell-O. Just gross stuff. Literally on screen for my less than 60 seconds. But friend of the show, my wife, were watching it. She's like, "That's Isaac Hayes." She clocked it right away. It was bizarre. People she recognizes. We also have Ashton Kutcher in a very early film role for him. This is 1999. This is that 70s show, Ashton Kutcher, and he plays, what's he, kid in Casino, maybe he's billed as. Ben Affleck's character swaps jackets with him, so they chase the wrong guy. But it's good bar trivia. You know, what film were Ben Affleck and Ashton Kutcher in together? Now you know the answer. Reindeer Games.
Good to know.
And with that, Andrew, I think we can jump into the scenes of this film. And of course, we're going to start with our personal favorite scenes, the high points of the movie. Andrew, you're going to kick us off here. In your opinion, when is this film firing on all cylinders, and what is the best scene in Reindeer Games?
So I think I'm going to go with our main heist that kind of, I would say, caps off the film, but we do end up having we have a bit of the rest of the film that continues on, giving us some more information and some more reveals after this heist. But the heist is kind of what we build to for this whole time. And it's kind of, I think, if there is something people remember from this film, it's the casino heist with Santa Clauses. Also, I gotta say, Chris, I don't know if you want to include this or not. You can or not. This is a tiny casino. Like, it's like, I mean, it seems so odd to me that it's this massive heist that they've been planning, and it's such a small casino.
Well, we can include that, sure. I guess I agree it's small, but I don't know what my frame of reference is other than like I don't really go to casinos, so like casinos in movies in Vegas, like those seem huge, I guess, but like I don't know, it's probably about the size of the casino in what's that TV show that the Ryan Johnson show?
Oh, Poker Face.
Poker Face. It's about the size.
Not that big.
They're about the same size, and that one's like attached into a hotel even. But I think like the actual
a lot of casinos
floor,
are attached to hotels.
Yeah, but the actual floor with the games are like about the same size.
I don't know. I've been to like the Rivers Casino here in Chicago, and it's massive. So just spoiled by my big city casinos, but of which I've been once, and I lost $100, folks. So don't do it.
That's the fun of it, right?
Sure. Would have been nice to leave with more than $100, but who am I? But anyway, so we kind of get through this whole, and there's one line in this movie, I texted it to you, but Ben Affleck is like, it's not like I'm just making this up. He's absolutely just making it up the whole time, and the heist is no exception. Like, you find out that he truly, honestly knows nothing about this casino, but they still stumble through it anyway. They are able to kind of secure all the places they want to secure. They take casualties, But this is where we start getting into the fun, big action, the big set pieces as we kind of have our would-be robbers squaring off against the casino security, and ultimately our casino owner, played by Dennis Farina, Jack Bangs. So it is a wild sequence that is not also without its fair share of twists and turns, and the imagery of a bunch of guys in Santa Claus suits robbing a casino is I'll remember that for a long time.
Speaking of the imagery of these guys in Santa Claus suits, we should say this at the time that's recording, it is before Christmas. Of course, we're releasing this as our last episode of the month, but we're in the throes of Christmas time right now. I'm watching this movie downstairs in the morning. My family comes down to eat breakfast. I've just turned the movie on. My son is 3. He's sitting at the table, and the movie opens with imagery of 5 dead Santa Clauses face down in the snow.
Oh no!
So we're very quickly like, look at your phone. Look at your phone, Bruce. And I ended up finishing the movie in a different room because there's a lot of other graphic stuff in this movie that we've discussed already. But yeah, the imagery is strong, and the guys in Santa suits, both robbing the casino and of course dead face down in the snow. We get that in media res structure to this movie, so you kind of know it's not gonna go well at the end of the day. It's a good pick for best scene, Andrew, because it is as far as the action is concerned, the climax of the film. I'm actually gonna go with a different scene, but also at the casino. I like the first time we go to the casino. We kind of first see the lay of the land. We have Rudy go in with his, he's telling the guys that he needs a disguise, so they dress him up like a cowboy. So, because they think he used to work there, they don't want to get recognized. And he's just going in there to scope out the place because he's convinced them that they have remodeled. And I like this because Rudy is just constantly trying to wiggle out of having to do this. Whether it's trying to convince them he doesn't actually know anything, or convince them he's not Nick, or just physically get away. That's a good 60 to 70% of this movie, and I really like that aspect of the story. And here it's like I think you and I actually texted about this when we're watching the movie. Like, he's in there with Charlize Theron, and he's got to act like he used to work there, and the security guard walks by, and he hides his face real fast. And she's like, "What? Who is it?" He goes, "Oh, that's Mike. He works here." Just no information. Like, he clearly knows nothing, but he's trying to pass off that he is this guy. And I don't know, I like that. I like the bad acting that we kind of, we have that dramatic irony where we know who all is really who, but see them try to convince people they are or aren't that person. It's always fun. And I do think it's there's some clever stuff here. I think it's clever how Merlin finds out he's lying. He asks this waitress about the remodel. She says it was never remodeled, so he goes to track him down. He has switched jackets with Ashton Kutcher, so they will follow the cowboy. He sneaks out the back. It's good. It's clever writing, and then we have this last little action scene where he is running across a frozen lake. Him and Charlize Theron end up trapped under the ice, which, holy cow, that is terrifying. Like, just flat out being in freezing water alone is terrifying. But the idea that there's a sheet of ice above you, I mean, people actually die this way. It's absolutely scary. Very, very intense stuff there. So I'm going to highlight this one. And before you weigh in on the scene, Andrew, I do got to say, we just talked about Hook last week. We have another Robin Williams appearance. It's his third appearance in this movie. Did you see his picture on the wall with...
Oh, yes. With Jack Bangs.
Yeah. You see him with Dolly Parton, other celebrities. One of them is Robin Williams and Jack Bangs. So, Robin Williams. Third time on Best of the Rest.
Really, really stretching that term as far as we can. I think this is a good pick, too.
I considered him for the Mark Strong Award. He's got that 1,000-watt smile in that photo. Really increase my enjoyment of the movie.
Don't sully the Mark Strong.
I said almost. He didn't get it.
A photo, Chris. I That's not Robin Williams. That's a picture of Robin Williams.
Sick reference.
I think this is a good pick. I think it's a good setup. It's a good scene that kind of, again, we're getting kind of a feel for what the dynamic of this heist is going to be, and how it's going to kind of unfold. And like you said, you got some good, fun sequences here. This is the one where Merlin finds out that, because the whole premise of that we've kind of entered into this with is that Rudy / Nick / Ben is telling these guys that they've remodeled the casino. And that he has no idea and he can't help them with anything now because the layout he knows is no longer the case. This is the sequence where we find out that that is not the case. Merlin is the one that discovers the casino was never remodeled. It's been the same since it was opened. That's when kind of all hell breaks loose and everybody's trying to run after everyone. They chase after Ashton Kutcher, and eventually find him running across this frozen lake, which I don't know how he thought that was going to go. But
he's in a movie on a frozen lake. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah, if only he thought about this. See, Rudolph, this is why you don't get to play any reindeer games. But it's I'm so funny. But it's
Andrew, I have
anyway,
a question about Rudolph, but I don't
sure.
know. I'm just saying this out loud so you remind me to ask you later, or we can talk about it now.
Sorry about now. Who cares?
Who cares? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He comes from the song. Did the song come from the TV special, or did the song exist first?
I believe the song existed first. I believe the Gene Autry version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer predates the television special.
How old do you think that song is?
40s, 50s?
So there was a time, like in the 30s, where like when you named Santa's reindeer, you just named 8 and stopped and didn't mention. Like the time kids just learned 8 reindeer names.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Rudolph is introduced.
39 apparently.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was first appeared in a 1939 booklet written by Robert L. May and published by Montgomery Ward, the old department store for those of you.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
My mom has a set of Christmas dishes from Montgomery Ward, but
fantastic.
Yeah. So, and then it looks like it spins out of that. And that's what ultimately leads to the song. That's what ultimately leads to the television special. And okay, so the song follows in 49. And Johnny Marks, Robert May's brother-in-law, turns it into a song. Gene Autry's recording of the song hits number 1.
So that's really when it's taken off. I mean, 49
yeah,
to the 50s, basically.
So that's into the late 40s. Before that, he was kind of mostly a mascot for department stores, which not as uncommon as you might think.
So 2 things here.
Department stores used to have a lot of pull.
2 things here. 1, Rudolph never appears in media unless it is specifically about Rudolph. Have you noticed this? Like the Santa Claus with Tim
Seen this? You heard about
like,
this?
Like I don't.
Yeah, he's not in it.
You never see him. It's always just the reindeer. I don't know what the deal is with that.
Yeah.
And also, I've always been bothered by the lyric. The way the song starts off is, I don't know, Donner, Dancer. I can't.
Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen.
I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger. I can't name them all, but all these reindeer. The song is like, hey, all these reindeer, but do you recall the most famous one? Why would you word it that way? Do you recall, if he's the most famous, why are you being like, do you recall the most famous one? Don't you think that's strange?
I believe in that term they are using famous in that Rudolph is the only reason Christmas happened the year that he was discovered and his labor was exploited.
So not like a celebrity style of famous.
Like it's famous in the sense that you still have Christmas, because basically he's famous in the sense that like you are not aware of the impact that he's had on Christmas.
Interesting.
Like that's the sense. Like he's the most important because without him, and again, the exploitation of his labor using his defect is only useful when it helps me. Otherwise, you get shunned. Right. That's the implication, is that, without Rudolph, Christmas gets stopped by bad weather. And with Rudolph, because we can't just invent headlights. We can't. We can build toys. We can build.
There's
everything.
a limit to the
we
magic,
can't just
Andrew.
Make,
Flying
we can't
reindeer
just
is
make
one
fog
thing,
lights.
but a light.
Yeah, it's wild.
Hmm.
It's weird to think about, but
Okay.
because I just watched.
You kind of fixed
I
that
just watched
lyric
Santa
for
Claus
me.
the movie last night. I watched Santa Claus the movie last night, which is a wild, wild movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
So you're not talking about the Santa Claus, Tim Allen. Like,
No,
it's
I'm talking about
called-
Santa Claus the movie.
It's called Santa Claus the movie. I don't know what this is.
It was one of the groups. It was one of the movies that the Salkinds made in the 80s that led to them selling the Superman rights to the Cannon Group so that
Okay.
they could make Superman 4. I think we mentioned it. I think I mentioned it by name.
I do recall that,
that
part
episode.
of the story. Yeah.
And so it's this wild, wild movie that first off starts as like a Santa Claus origin story. Like it talks about how the man becomes the original Santa Claus and like how all the tenets of Santa Claus like come to be. Like they give him a green suit first and like, I don't know if that one really works. They give him the red suit and they're like, this is it. And like, no, it's just all this Santa stuff. They show it in real time. And then the movie cuts to this weird sequence with like Dudley Moore as like his assistant. It gets made his assistant. And he introduces like assembly line factory stuff so they can make toys faster. But the machine work is really shoddy and it starts making bad toys that get returned. So so Dudley Moore ends up leaving the North Pole in disgrace. And he goes to like New York and hooks up with this corrupt toy CEO played by John Lithgow, who's like on trial for his toys being filled with like glass and things like that. And
I can only let you keep
I'm
talking
not
for
even
so
kidding.
long. Like this keeps getting more absurd.
it's the most. And then there's literally a subplot about this rich girl who turns out to be like John Lithgow's step niece or something, and this weird homeless kid that lives outside her house.
My favorite part about the story is that you are getting over an illness, and this looks painful for you to say every word.
And then Santa Claus befriends both of them. Oh my god.
I gotta leave her coughing in so people understand.
Oh my god. Anyway,
You're
so
like-
Santa Claus befriends both of them. And so then Dudley Moore's elf literally like devises his own things to give out on Christmas so that he can win favor back with Santa Claus. So he invents literally lollipops to let you fly. And then the big master stroke is because he works for this greedy CEO. He comes up with Christmas 2. Where he develops, instead of lollipops, it's candy canes. But the problem is the candy canes explode if they get hot. It is the most insane movie I think I've ever seen, Christmas or anything, because it doesn't stop doing weird stuff.
I am crying, watching you turn red, trying to get these words out before the next coughing fit. That
Anyway,
sounds
folks.
insane.
Oh.
Christmas 2, they literally call it that?
John Lithgow is like, we'll put it out on March 25th and we'll call it Christmas 2.
That comes up in this movie. That Danny Trejo pitches that.
He does. That's also what reminded me of it.
That's crazy. Do you think that is a nod to
I'm
Santa
gonna guess
Claus in the
no.
movie?
But yes, the thought did occur to me. John Lithgow almost, and the best part is, first off, the movie's like 2 hours, which is way longer than any movie about Santa Claus needs to be. But like John Lithgow's character and that whole plot doesn't pick up for like an hour. Like the movie is halfway over before John Lithgow's character introduces himself to kind of do this second plot. It's like 3 different movies like stuffed into one thing.
I mean, I'm sold. I've got to see it to see this thing exists.
It's absolutely amazing. John Lithgow almost carries the whole thing once he shows up, the energy changes for the better. But it's wild. I watched it I remember watching it as a kid and I was just like, it's a Santa Claus movie. And like rewatching it as an adult, I'm just like, what is going on? Like, what is happening in this movie? So yes, I recommend for anybody looking for something a little bit strange.
Very good. We touched on what's probably my favorite plot point in this movie. My favorite piece of writing for sure. Like I said, I like watching this character, watching Rudy try to wiggle his way out. He tries to straight up telling him the truth. I'm not Nick. I'm his cellmate. I took his place. They're not believing him. Which again plays better in hindsight because you know why they don't believe him. Well, you know why Charlize Theron knows the truth, so she can act like she's not believing him to make her brother, which is actually her lover, also go along with. Oh, man, wild. At any rate, what I'm trying to get at here is Rudy trying to wiggle his way out. He tries telling the truth. He tries running away. My favorite one, though, is they show him their crude, like, blueprint of the casino, which is just a drawing they did on notebook paper of the layout. Because he used to work there as a security guard. He looked at it.
To scale, guys.
And he goes, "This isn't the casino." And like, "What are you talking about?" Yesterday, he said, "No, it's not. Everything's in the wrong spot." And like, they're not picking up on it. So he himself has to go, man, I guess they remodeled. Yeah. The owner was always talking about a remodel. He must have done it. And it's again, one of those things where like, he, as the character Rudy, is doing a bad job acting, trying to play this off. But you, as the viewer, can follow the steps and layers to kind of see why it is coming off bad. But I thought it was clever. I don't know. Watching this guy try to wiggle out of it, I thought it was a clever thing to try. A clever ploy to try to pull over these guys. It doesn't work. They don't care. They want him to scope it out and get the new lay of the land and use his knowledge anyway. But it's fun. I loved all those little attempts of him trying to get out of this.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun too. Like you said, it's kind of a recurring gag throughout the film that he's literally like bad at trying to make it seem like he's like telling the truth. And but the thing is the guys that he's talking to don't really know any better. All they're going off of is what's in these letters, and that's not enough information to really be able to decide. So you've basically got a group that doesn't know any better and a guy who's not great at kind of making things up on the fly. And it makes for it's an interesting twist. It makes for some fun comedic interactions, and it really does string the tension out of our premise a little bit more.
Let's talk about some of these twists, Andrew. First off, we have Rudy, shortly before the big heist, catches Charlize Theron and Gary Sinise in a pool together. And you can tell by the way they're talking, something's up. She takes off her top. They start making out. And it's revealed that they are not brother and sister. They are lovers. Andrew, was there a moment in your brain, though, where you thought maybe they were still brother and sister while they're doing this?
I mean, I've seen Lone Star, so I wasn't throwing it out of my brain. But
I feel like a lot of movies have done this. Like it's like, I don't know, a weird edgy thing that they do in screenwriting sometimes where like,
yeah, I mean,
incest, Game of Thrones does it a lot from
Game
what
of
I
Thrones,
hear.
yeah. Yeah, they really get the incest right.
Just right.
That's a line for Community, folks. Please don't come after me. But it's I mean, there was a moment where I was like, oh, are we really going to go there? And then they kind of didn't. And I was like, all right, good. You really didn't. It's not like it's adding anything. Like I made a joke about, Lone Star, but like it's just not, I mean, I don't really care. certainly by that point in the movie, I'm just like, all right. I would have kind of been like, all right, whatever. Like, just keep
Sure.
going. But overall, now once they kind of have that moment, I was like, nah, we're clearly just taking old Rudy for a ride at this point, and yeah.
So the revelation is that they've been working together. They've been in cahoots, this brother and sister that are actually boyfriend, girlfriend, playing Nick. And, they think he's Nick. But then we have another twist where it's revealed after Charlize Theron kills Gary Sinise that original Nick is actually alive. And he is the one dating Ashley, who her name isn't actually Ashley. And they have concocted it. So let me try to get this concoction. So he goes away to prison because he killed somebody who was giving her a hard time. And then while he's in prison, he comes up with this idea. He's like, hey, baby, you work as a waitress. You talk to all these low lives, these gun runners. Why don't you get close to some of them, get involved with one of them, and then you come up with an idea to write letters to inmates so they will fall in love with you and then give you valuable information. So once they get out, you can use that information to, say, rob a casino. He's going to play the part of inmate, but before he gets out, he's going to fake his own death, and his cellmate, who has heard all of these letters read out loud, will make the decision to take his place and lie to you. And the two of you will start a romance and then carry out the crime. And it's okay if he dies because he's not really me. And then me and you can keep all the money. Is that right, Andrew? Did I get the Nick's plan right?
Give or take, the classic American love story. It's man meets girl, gets convicted on manslaughter for said girl, goes to prison, concocts plan to rob casino, utilizing her, recruiting people on the outside, and then creating a false correspondence while in prison to have those men on the outside believe that this man on the inside has insider information. But before you get released, you fake your own death to allow your cellmate to take your place so that they all carry off the heist and do the dangerous part, and then you get to pick up the pieces in the aftermath. And if anything goes wrong, you just all walk away.
Yeah. That old tale. It is hashtag PP. I mean, this isn't really necessarily meant as good or bad, but it's one of the more convoluted criminal plans I've ever seen in a movie. Ever.
It's extremely convoluted.
It's up there.
It's extremely convoluted. It's
what I will say,
Ben Affleck
though,
even says at one point, he's like, so much could have gone wrong.
Yes.
Like,
I love that. I love that he's like thousands of things could have gone wrong. Like, he's like calling out how improbable this is. And Nick just says, he's like, yeah, don't you think I know what a long shot is? But if something goes wrong, we would have just walked away. No one knows who she is because she's using a fake name. So it's like, all right, movie. Yeah, we're just seeing the 1 in 1,000 scenario where this thing actually played out. Sure. Okay. Yeah, why not?
I just turned into that gif I send you of like the basketball player on the bench, just all stirred, and then just opens his eyes wide and goes, I guess. That's pretty much what I was. Yeah, I do like how Ben Affleck realizes that something is wrong here because Ashley/Millie accurately depicts how Nick was killed in prison, which she doesn't know. And I always do like when characters do that little giveaway, when it's just like, oh,
you know something that
we're
you
supposed to know that one,
privy
didn't you?
Yep.
And so what I do like about it, though, is like Gary Sinise is also flabbergasted by this. Like, he's like also to the point that like he stops what he's doing and it's kind of like, how did you know that? And I'm like, what do you care?
Yeah.
Like,
And then after all this, we get our last bit where Rudy gets to walk back to his hometown that he's mentioned a few times in his voiceover. He just wants to have a family meal and enjoy the holidays. He's in a Santa getup. He has a sack full of cash, like Santa's sack. And on his walk, this 15-mile walk to his hometown, he's putting hundreds of thousands of dollars in people's mailbox. And it looks to be like the break of dawn, right? Andrew, I'm watching the movie wrong, but I couldn't help but be like, the mailman is going to be loaded. He's going to come by to deliver the mail. He's going to find stacks of cash in all these mailboxes. And of course, he's going to keep it. But I guess, you know what? It's Christmas Eve, though, isn't it? So mail's not going to run. So I guess maybe the people will, if they check their mail. If they happen to check the mail on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I guess they will get it. But I know it's besides the point. The point is he doesn't care about the money. He just wants to go enjoy his family. He's giving it away.
And hopefully he kept like one of those for himself.
He doesn't have the sack by the time he makes it home. But yeah, I would hope that he stashed some of it away. I do love, look, I know we bring this up a lot, but this is a pre-9/11 movie. And there's definitely some of that innocence here. And we watched this man, Rudy, murder several people. He kills Charlize Theron. Maybe you could call that one a self-defense, but Nick, he orchestrates his death. He murders that man, sends him off a cliff, and then just walks home to his family. And we're supposed to have the feeling like happily ever after, right? But this man is going back to prison, is he not?
I mean, Nick tried to kill him first, to be fair. Like
he trapped him in a car, then sent the 18-wheeler. Like, he didn't have to do this. This is going to catch up to him.
Except will it, though? Because as she keeps saying throughout that, 5 Santas went in, 5 need to be accounted for on the way out.
Okay,
and Nick's
look.
body is number 5.
All right. Maybe the screenplay has thought about all these things already. Okay, fair enough. Maybe he is going to get away with it. And it's just... one thing I kept thinking about this movie is like Reservoir Dogs comes out in 1992. 8 years later, Reindeer Games comes out. The influence of Quentin Tarantino in the 90s and the movie full of bad guys that are your protagonist, kind of, it blows up. And I'm not saying Tarantino invented it by any means, the idea that your bad guys, your low-life criminals can star in your movie and be the main attraction. But he definitely popularizes it and starts this big wave in the 90s, and I think this is firmly in that wave, along with movies like Smokin' Aces or Boondock Saints.
I think 3,000 Miles to Graceland has to be next on our list, though, as far as heist movies committed by men in elaborate costumes.
The Elvis one, yeah. Mark Strong Award winner David Arquette is in that film.
Yes, as well as some chumps called Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner. So
not familiar.
Yeah, me either.
Do they have any Mark Strong awards? I don't think so.
Kurt Russell should if he doesn't.
Have we talked to Kurt Russell? I don't think we have.
I don't know that we have. I don't think that we have. If we have, that's terrible. But do a Kurt Russell month. I'm sure there's enough in there to work off of. But that's a different conversation for another day, folks. But no, I think you are right. Like that idea of like the group of bad guys specifically all kind of imploding on one another in kind of like a tense, isolated scene. That's that's very much the end of Reservoir Dogs. And I think that influence is very much being felt throughout the 90s. To varying levels of returns. Obviously something like Reservoir Dogs is very good at it. Nails the tension and everything quite well, while a lot of the stuff that came in the aftermath was just trying to kind of jump off of that. And I'm sure, like I said, Tarantino is no stranger to the influences that kind of brought him to the table, to the things that kind of influence what he does. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of plays into that. But Reservoir Dogs to Reindeer Games, man. What a time.
And just like that, Andrew, the holidays are done. God, I can't believe we are just weeks away from 2025.
Ugh. Why'd you do that?
You weren't supposed to go along with it, Andrew.
What was I supposed to do?
You're supposed to correct me, because if we're not weeks away from 2025.
I mean, sure we are.
55 weeks away. Andrew, let's try this again, and I'm leaving this on the episode. Man, I can't believe we're just weeks away from 2025.
Chris, it's actually just weeks away from 2024.
I know, that's why I can't believe it.
Chris, that's two. That's two in one episode. I'm
leaving it all in. Yeah, end of the calendar year. Obviously, this is where we get really sentimental and say thank you so much for listening. Super appreciate it. I love that we do this podcast. I can't believe how long it's been going on. We are fast approaching 150 episodes. We have some big stuff planned for the big celebration. And yeah, sincere thank you, dear listeners, for joining us for this ride.
Me as well. I can't thank you guys enough for the support at this point. The fact that we're still able to go and still able to do this it means a lot.
I'm really bad at remembering to do this, so this is me telling you to go review the podcast on Apple Podcast. Subscribe, tell your friends, follow us on social media, all the usual podcast call to actions that I probably should do at the end of every episode, but I only do what I remember. So here's my my last 2023 reminder to do those things if you haven't already. Moving into 2024, we're going to be starting strong, I think. The month of January. Got a whole new theme coming. There are 5 Tuesdays in January. There'll be 5 new episodes of Best of the Rest. And our theme is M. Night Shyamalan. We are diving into the man's filmography, taking a second look at some of his movies that were not well received upon release. You talk about interesting filmographies. We were talking about that earlier, talking about our director of this episode. Very interesting. The highs, the lows, the man's reputation from movie to movie. There's really nothing else like it. The second and third chances that he gets, and then bounces back out of nowhere with a hit film or a critically well received movie. I mean, that it's all over the place. So, what do you think he's batting? Like 500? Most people would say like half of his movies are getting a thumbs up from the average moviegoer. What do you think, Andrew?
Maybe a little less. I think it's a lot more even now than it used to be. There was a period of time there where people basically had kind of written him off as kind of a twist machine, as it were. Like he couldn't get out of his own way type thing, and that kind of bogged down all of his films. A lot of people, what he did The Last Airbender pretty much made him a no-go for life. There's been quite a lot of thoughts about M. Night. The man's not without his controversies, but I think he's getting close to the 500 at this point. But I would say it's still probably a little less than that.
Well, I will say we are not going to be talking about The Last Airbender this month, but there are 5 other films in his filmography we will be diving into. We're starting next week with The Village. This is... The man starts off strong. If you start at The Sixth Sense, the man starts off strong for most people. The Village, I think, is the first time you have people hopping off of the M. Night hype train. Sneak peek, I was still on board, baby. I'm on board with this movie, but we'll be diving into it next week. All the positives, everything it does well. If you want to weigh in on M. Night Shyamalan and your thoughts on his movies and give us some Mark Strong Award picks and best scenes, you can, of course, just hop into our Discord. There's a link right there in the show notes. If you haven't joined us already, get in there, share some thoughts on M. Night and anything else you want to talk about. The door's always open. And until then, Happy New Year. And, maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Nick and Rudy are prison cellmates on the verge of being released when Nick is fatally stabbed during a food fight. Once
we're off to a great start. It's quite the cast, but I like my villains, Chris, so I got to go with the man, Gary Sinise as Ezekiel. Not Ezekiel, Gabriel. I'm getting my angel names mixed up. I'm sorry. It's like I have moments where I think, like, imagine Plato, like, seeing me sit on my couch, telling Google to turn out my lights. Like, just imagine how far he would think we've come to be so lazy. And I have that moment a lot where I'm just like, imagine the great thinkers of the world watching me be like, hey, Google, but don't actually, hey, Google, turn off the lights. And they'd be like, what are you doing? My lights are probably about to actually turn off.
Yep, there you go.
Yep.